Hello and good evening, everybody. Good evening. It's a bit ramshackle around here, but it's great to see you on this edition of the Politicrat. Thank you very much indeed for joining live. I've got this all messed up here. I'm not getting myself quite straight here, but that was, if you watched it, I think a very good night for President Biden. This is exactly 2 weeks now after what we saw at that debate. I would hope that the banner headlines in the corporate news media tonight, the Chiron, you would hope would read Biden knocks it out of the park. But as I switch around in the corporate news media, I don't see that headline. I don't see the Chiron saying Biden was brilliant tonight. I don't see the Chiron saying Democrats feel more reassured tonight. I don't see that Chiron. Do you? I don't see it. And I tell you, President Biden tonight in that news conference did everything you would want. And look, he did very well tonight. He answered all the questions. I thought it was a very good news conference for him. I thought that he did extremely well. I found his command of everything tonight was terrific. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the man did the job. He earned his keep, did a good job. And there's no complaints here. I don't know how you can. I hope you can hear me, but there's absolutely no complaints here as far as I'm concerned. I think he did a fantastic job. Now, look, he talked about a number of things. He went, a lot of the questions, of course, dealt with whether or not he is fit to run. I thought that the man was very sharp tonight. I thought he asked the questions very well. I've noted the contrast when he talked about how world leaders were basically praying that he'd win during the course of this NATO summit. They were coming up to him saying, "You've got to win this thing," while you've got Democratic elites and rich donors saying, "Joe, drop out." I mean, this is really about a small bunch of elites, white male elites, and maybe one or two white female elites, but usually white male elites of a certain age, calling for President Biden to drop out. I mean, that's really what's going on here. And the bottom line is that these elites are probably very upset tonight that President Biden did so well. I thought he did a very, very good job. Now, one or two points I wanted to talk about. I think this played very well tonight for people across the country, the voters, the average voter out there, who I think probably look, the average voter out there probably who really likes him even more now. And I think that they're going to be very pleased at what they saw tonight with the president of the United States. This whole attack on him for the last 2 weeks, principally in the corporate news media, but also among some of these more elitist, moderate, centrist, and conservative Democrats, has been nothing but a pile on, nothing but a pile on. And I think tonight President Biden looked smart, as he always is. I think he looked very sympathetic. And I was genuinely moved at times by how he was answering some of these questions, how he was reflecting on his political career, talking about the things that I think engender a lot of sympathy. I think that he was talking not only to the donors tonight and the donor class in his party and the base of donors and these white upper echelon elites who have been begging him to drop out of here. I think he was talking to the country. I think he was talking to the globe. I really, really think so. I think this is a case of Joe versus the volcano. I really think that tonight President Biden was talking to the globe, talking to the globe, talking to the country. I thought that the fact that this was held after the NATO summit in DC, I thought was a very smart thing for the campaign to do. I think that that gave him even more stature. He looked much more presidential, but not just presidential. He looked like the leader of the free world. And he looked like somebody who looked very refreshed, very sharp, and very well. Now, a lot of these questions tonight, as I said before, the bulk of these questions tonight were all about whether he could run. Can he still run? Is Vice President Harris the better alternative? All the rest of this kind of nonsense that really is designed for headlines. I think a lot of these questions, particularly by the Beltway press and these corporate news media Beltway press, a lot of that was all about the getting questions for headlines and sound bites. That's really what their questions seem to be tilted at, rather than anything else. And so, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of this stuff for me, for these questions, were very immature, very predictable kinds of questions. And I thought that President Biden dealt with them all very well. I think he took about 15 questions, between a dozen, maybe a dozen questions. Press conference went about an hour, just about 58 minutes. He started for the first 8+ minutes talking about the achievements of the NATO summit. I thought he was particularly sharp and effective doing that. I think that he really did recalibrate the sense of his leadership and the platform on which he was speaking. I think President Biden was keenly aware that there was a global audience watching this, because it wasn't just the United States, as I've said. He was really speaking to the globe. And he was speaking to those donors, but he was more so speaking to the globe and speaking to the country itself. And I think that he did a very good job answering these questions really well. I've got some notes that I took down, a lot of notes. He touted his record very well. I like the fact that he said that, look, I'm in this, I'm running. There's still a lot more work to be done. I'm running to finish the job. And let the man finish the job. I think these Democratic donors tonight must have been writhing in all kinds of agony watching President Biden do such a great job. I think that some of these white elitist Democrats and the donor class who've been begging for him to drop out, and there's rumors that Obama's one of these people too, so make that one black person as well, who've been begging for him to drop out, they must have been writhing in agony tonight. They absolutely must have been writhing in agony, because President Biden did a masterful job on that stage tonight. Exactly 2 weeks ago on this night was the debate, and all that fallout in the media, which has been completely media generated and donor class generated. I think tonight, President Biden did a marvelous job. Looking through the notes again, he cited his economic record. He cited the record in terms of what the 16 Nobel laureate economists had said about him and about the job he's done. He proudly touted his record, which I think the campaign needs to continue to do and do a lot more of. I thought he did a brilliant job tonight, selling his vision, talking about needing to finish the job, talking about the things he's got done, the legislation he's got done. He likened himself to, somewhat to LBJ in the sense of the scale of his accomplishments have not been seen in the American presidency since LBJ, and in his words, and possibly before that. And I would agree. There's no question about it. President Biden has become, in some ways, a transformational president. Now, look, there's still lots of things that need to be done. His presidency, though, is among the 10 best ever, probably one of the 5 best ever presidencies. And he's not even got to the end of this first term yet. That is not an exaggeration. He has helped so many people. He didn't even talk about the student loan debt that he got forgiven, $170 billion of it. He didn't even talk about half the accomplishments. He mentioned the economy and how strong it's been, how inflation has gone down, how food prices are beginning to come down, but still they need to come down more. He talked about Israel and how conservative and hard right Israel is in their war cabinet, one of the most staunchly hard right cabinets ever, although he said conservative. Yes, he did say Vice President Trump in the first few minutes, and I'm sure the media are going to hop on that from here till next week. Of course, he obviously meant Vice President Harris. And yes, Peter Alexander at the end of the press conference was rabbiting on, oh, but do you know that Donald Trump is now using the fact that you said Vice President Trump as some issue about your condition not being sharp? I mean, geez, man. This guy is just ridiculous. Media people are just ridiculous. And yes, Trump is an idiot. And I love the way that Biden responded. He said, well, ask him, listen to him. Yeah. I mean, no one's doing any analysis on all the times that this orange felon gets up on the stage and talks about washing machines and sharks and Hannibal Lecter and showers and electrocution and all this kind of nonsense that means nothing, that makes no sense. No one's talking about that. So obviously for me, I think President Biden did an excellent job. I don't think that's a big deal about him saying Vice President Trump. Look, he's met with, 32 world leaders over the last 3 days. If he gets a name or two wrong, blimey. I mean, really, are we going to now say he should drop out because he got a name wrong? How many times have people on the air in the media got names wrong? How many times? How many times have I heard newscasters say the wrong word? I mean, this is just silly. And again, it reveals the very ageist culture that we have here in the United States. But I can tell you, dear viewer, that President Biden was absolutely on it tonight, completely 110%. He said that he would run. He said that there was no problem with him at all. He said that there's lots of polls out there that show him being someone who would win quite easily. He's certainly somebody who said, look, how many times are the polls accurate anyway? And it's so true. There's lots of polls that say President Biden's doing well. And one thing that was not talked about, there was one person that asked a question about how can you reassure voters? Well, it's not the voters that need reassuring, because the vast majority of the voters out there want him in the race. They want him to run. This is all these Mickey Mouse polls that you don't know came from where and how they asked the questions. And you know that pollsters can manipulate questions and ask them in a certain way designed to get a certain result. That's what pollsters do, some of them. But there's lots of polls out there that are undersampling black folk and oversampling white people and oversampling types of white people and groups of white people. I mean, this is how this stuff gets done. So President Biden did a very good job. 1 hour press news conference. I think he did very well. Look, I think he really came across even better tonight than he has, obviously, the debate. And I do think that he now will have a whole lot more fundraising as a result of what he did tonight. I think this was a really good conviction of convincing of people, and he had strong conviction in what he was saying. And look, there's really no more to say about this. And these donor elites in the Democratic Party need to just get behind President Biden. Biden basically said that, and he basically said that in the press conference, in the news conference. He said that it's almost impossible here to now have a different candidate, to start from scratch. All that money, he's got hundreds of millions of dollars. He said over $200 million, which is true. He has that cash on hand right now. And even if donors did withhold money from him, the contributions that he's going to be getting and is getting from members of the public, at $200 or under, I mean, that's going to fuel him. The people are going to be the ones that see this over the line, not these donors, not these elites and these Democrats, not these millionaire and billionaire donors. It's going to be the everyday person like you and I who are going to see this through, see this over the line. And he's going to win in a landslide, I think, this November. I don't think there's any question about it. I think while in the short term, I think all of this media nonsense and all of the these elite Democrats who have come out like George Clooney and look like an idiot in the short term actually hurts Biden in the short term. I think in the long run, this helps Biden, because it shows you his resilience. It shows you his fight. It shows you him being battle tested. And one thing Americans love is a person who shows some fight and some spirit, an underdog who has been knocked down, who's been battered in the press these last 2 weeks, who has been getting it left, right, and center from these editorial boards. By the way, the New York Times, they came out and said, oh, Donald Trump is unfit to lead. Well, you're a bit late on that bandwagon, mate. It's too bad it took you 2 freaking weeks to come up with that. The Philadelphia Inquirer took a day and a half to come out with that assessment. So the bottom line is that the New York Times now, trying to rebuild its much ripped reputation, which I'm sure it will not salvage because the unsubscribes have just gone way up with the New York Times. But the bottom line is that I think this plays very well to the country. I think he's going to get a lot of fundraising off of this news conference alone. And I think it's a perfect lead-in to what you're going to have next week, the kangaroo court of chaos of fascists in that RNC fascist Klan convention. This is what you're going to have, the Klan fascist rally for the next 4 days beginning on Monday. So I think that this will dominate the news cycle. I hope it does, because the corporate news media, they're going to find a way to make it clear that the donors don't like this. And the media bosses who definitely want to see their taxes cut and want to see greater deregulation, the only candidate that will do that for them is the fascist and dictator in chief. So you know who they want back in the White House. But as for the rest of us and the average person, like you, like me, we want President Biden to serve a second term. No tampering with the ticket. Leave Vice President Harris where she is on the ticket. No presto changeo. No wiping away two candidates. No wiping away any candidate on the ticket between Biden and Harris. And even some of the questions designed to divide and cause confusion were swatted away very easily by the president. And also, there was some actually maybe 2 or 3 questions that didn't refer to, well, can you do this job? And usually those were from journalists who were from outside the United States. Isn't that telling? And not surprising. So that is it. I've got a lot more to say on tomorrow's edition of the Politicrat Daily Podcast. And of course, I'll be writing a little bit about this as well. So that is it for now. Thank you indeed for tuning in and joining or watching later on. And it's been a pleasure. And until, of course, next time, I appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. And don't forget, the Politicrat Daily Podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, Google, Pandora, Amazon, oh my goodness me, Odyssey, you name it. You name a platform, it's there. Audible. And of course, on social media, you can see all the information in this video and the links. But you can find me on social media at the Popcorn REEL on X, popcorn REEL .bsky.social on Blue Sky. On Fanbase, it's fanbase.app/popcorn REEL. And of course, on Spoutable, spoutable.com/popcorn REEL. Please follow and subscribe to the Politicrat Daily Podcast newsletter and essays. You can do that at the following web address, politicrat.substack.com, and follow on Substack at Politicrat and at, of course, Popcorn REEL. Oh my goodness me. So many social media platforms and channels. And of course on Threads, threads.net/popcorn REEL. Thank you, and thank you again. I'm Omar Moore. Thank you very much for watching this edition of the Politicrat Live.